In the vast reaches of space, on a planet forgotten by most, the remains of an ancient temple stood alone. The winds howled through its crumbling walls, carrying the faintest echoes of a past when this place was the heart of worship for entire civilizations. And yet, now it lay silent, abandoned by those who once revered the entity within. Deep inside the temple, where shadows clung to every corner, a figure, once mighty, now frail, remained. It was the alien god, its body nearly unrecognizable, weakened by centuries of neglect. The air around it seemed to pulse with fading energy, like the final breaths of a being that once held galaxies in its grip. Eyes that had once glowed with divine power were now dim, barely reflecting the remnants of light that filtered through the cracks in the ceiling. This god had been forgotten. Once, it had ruled the hearts and minds of the greatest species in the galaxy. They had prayed for its guidance, sought its wisdom, and revered its presence. But time had worn away their devotion. They had moved on, turned to technology, seeking answers in machines and logic, leaving their god behind like a relic of a bygone era. The civilizations that had thrived under its influence now saw it as nothing more than an artifact of their primitive past. So, they had abandoned it. No more prayers, no more offerings. Only silence. The god was dying. It had tried, in the beginning, to reach out to its followers, but as the years dragged on, it became clear that they would not return. Now, all it could do was wait for the end. It had accepted its fate, knowing that the beings it had once nurtured had no more use for it. The irony wasn't lost, forgotten by those who had once been powerless without it. Suddenly, there was a stirring in the ruins above. Voices, unfamiliar but curious, echoed through the empty halls. The god's senses, dulled by eons of isolation, barely registered the presence of others. It wasn't the advanced alien species that had once built its temple, nor the technologically superior beings that now ruled the galaxy. These were different. They were human. The humans descended carefully, their voices growing louder as they approached. The god could hear them now, feel their footsteps against the stone. A group of explorers, no doubt. The god had heard of humanity, but it had never interacted with them. They were insignificant, so far behind the great species that had once knelt before it. And yet here they were, standing at the threshold of a forgotten god. "Is this it?" one of them said, stepping closer. The god could feel the heat of their curiosity. They had found it. The faint hum of their technology brushed against its consciousness, drawing it from its lethargy. They weren't here to worship. No, they were explorers, scientists perhaps, curious about the ruins, not the god itself. Another voice chimed in. "I thought it was a myth. This thing, it's alive?" The speaker hesitated, clearly unsettled by the idea of a living deity, even in its weakened state. The god stirred, ever so slightly, enough to draw their full attention. The humans grew quiet, sensing something they didn't fully understand. The god, in its desperation, reached out to them, its voice weak and trembling in their minds. "I am forgotten." The humans reacted, their eyes widening in shock. They hadn't expected the god to speak, let alone in a language they could comprehend. But this was no ordinary communication, it was telepathic, a direct link to their minds. The god's words weren't just sounds, they were emotions, thoughts, images of a time long past. One of the humans, braver than the rest, stepped forward. "You're alive," they said, their voice filled with both awe and sorrow. "What happened to you?" The god hesitated, unsure if it was worth explaining. But then, what did it have to lose? "My people, they left me. They turned to their machines. Their science. I am no longer needed." Each word carried centuries of pain and abandonment, and the humans felt it as though it were their own loss. "They abandoned you?" a human asked, disbelief evident in their tone. The group exchanged looks, as though trying to comprehend how an entire civilization could forget something so powerful. To humans, loyalty meant something. They couldn't imagine leaving behind a being that had once given so much. The god, sensing their empathy, spoke again, its voice growing fainter. "I am dying." The humans didn't turn away. They didn't leave the temple like so many others before them. Instead, they did something that no one had done for centuries. They stayed. One of them, the leader of the group, crouched beside the god's weakened form. "We can help you," they said, the certainty in their voice surprising even their own companions. It wasn't a grand declaration or a bold statement. It was simple, matter of fact. They couldn't walk away from a being in pain, not even if that being was a god. The god didn't believe them. How could these fragile, mortal creatures possibly help it? "You cannot save me. I am too far gone." There was finality in its tone, the resignation of a being that had long since given up hope. But the humans, stubborn as always, wouldn't accept that. "We can try," the leader insisted. "If there's a chance, we'll take it. That's what we do." And in that moment, the god felt something it hadn't felt in millennia, a spark of hope. These humans, insignificant as they were in the grand scheme of the galaxy, were offering to save it, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. "Why?" the god asked, the question heavy with confusion. The human smiled faintly, as though the answer was obvious. "Because no one deserves to be abandoned." The god's presence, once barely noticeable, began to grow stronger. Its telepathic voice, though still weak, conveyed a sense of wonder. It couldn't understand why the humans would even bother. Their species was known for its curiosity, yes, but this? Helping an ancient, dying god with nothing to offer them? The god hadn't encountered such a gesture before, and it couldn't shake the feeling that there was something unique about these beings. As the humans worked, they spoke to one another, tossing ideas back and forth on how they could possibly help. The god listened, intrigued by their discussion. They spoke of ways to stabilize its energy, using a mix of their own rudimentary technology and some of the ancient tools scattered around the temple. They weren't engineers, not scientists in the strict sense, but their determination was undeniable. One of the humans knelt beside the god, carefully examining the intricate symbols that lined its form. "These markings. I think they're part of a system. Maybe they controlled its power source." The others nodded, eager to try anything that might restore the god's strength. Despite the fact that they were dealing with something far beyond their understanding, they remained calm, focused, and determined. The god, for its part, was impressed. "You are unlike the others," it murmured into their minds. "They left me when I was no longer of use. But you…" it trailed off, unable to comprehend the motivation behind their actions. The leader of the group glanced up, meeting the god's gaze, as if trying to understand its confusion. "We don't leave people behind," they said simply, their tone unwavering. It was a creed they lived by, a principle that guided them, even when facing the unknown. One of the others chimed in, looking at the leader. "Do you really think we can do this? I mean, this is a god we're talking about." There was doubt, yes, but not fear. The rest of the team paused, waiting for a response. The leader didn't hesitate. "If we don't try, it dies. That's reason enough." There was no need for further discussion. They returned to their task, determined to find a way. The god watched, intrigued by their stubbornness, their refusal to accept failure. It had witnessed so many species, so many civilizations rise and fall, each one eventually succumbing to their own arrogance or apathy. But these humans, they were different. Their motives were not rooted in self-interest or gain. They were helping simply because it was the right thing to do. Slowly, with the humans' assistance, the god's energy began to stabilize. It wasn't much, just a flicker of power returning to its once mighty form, but it was more than it had felt in centuries. As the humans worked, they communicated with the god, trying to learn more about its past, its powers, and the species that had once worshipped it. "Why did they leave you?" one of them asked, curiosity evident in their voice. The god paused before responding. "They no longer needed me. They found their answers in science, in their technology. I became obsolete." There was no bitterness in its voice, only a deep, quiet sadness. One of the humans shook their head. "No one should be cast aside like that," they said softly. It was a sentiment the god had never heard before. The species that had worshipped it always saw everything in terms of usefulness, of what could be gained. Once they determined the god had nothing left to offer, they discarded it without a second thought. But these humans, they were different. As they continued their work, the god began to feel a connection with them, something it hadn't felt in millennia. "If I regain my strength, there will be consequences," it warned, its voice stronger now, resonating in their minds. "Those who abandon me will not allow my return. They will see you as a threat for aiding me." The humans didn't flinch. Instead, the leader smiled grimly. "Let them come," they said. "We're not afraid of a fight." The god, now regaining some of its old strength, could sense the truth in their words. Humans, though fragile in body compared to many other species, had a spirit that refused to bend, even in the face of overwhelming odds. It was something the god had never encountered before. "You would risk everything, for me?" The leader's expression softened. "You're not just a god, are you? You're alive, just like us. And no one deserves to be abandoned, not even a god." The god fell silent, absorbing the weight of their words. These humans, so small in comparison to the vastness of the galaxy, had hearts that burned brighter than any star. They weren't helping for power, or glory, or even hope of reward. They were helping because they believed in something greater, the value of every life, even that of a forgotten god. "You may regret this," the god said quietly, its voice laced with a mixture of gratitude and caution. "But I will not forget." The leader chuckled softly. "We don't do it for thanks. We do it because it's right." With that, the humans continued their work, focused on the task at hand. They didn't know what would happen once the god was fully restored, or what kind of conflict might arise with the alien civilizations that had left it to die. But they didn't care. They were here, now, and they were determined to do what they could. The god, for the first time in eons, allowed itself to hope. These humans, with their reckless compassion and unshakable determination, had given it something it thought it had lost forever: faith. Not in their abilities, or their technology, but in something far more powerful: their hearts. Word of the god's revival spread faster than the humans could have imagined. The civilizations that had once worshipped it, the ones that turned their backs so easily, were not pleased. To them, the god's return was a threat to their new order, their reliance on technology, and their sense of superiority. They could not allow the past to rise again, especially not with the involvement of humans, such an insignificant species in their eyes. It started with a distant rumbling in the sky, a low hum that gradually grew louder. The god sensed it first, warning the humans of what was coming. The former followers had detected the god's resurgent energy. They were coming not to worship, but to destroy what they now saw as an unwanted relic. It wasn't just about eliminating the god, it was about erasing any trace of the old ways that had once bound them. The fact that humans were involved only added fuel to their rage. The humans prepared as best they could. They weren't soldiers, but they were resourceful. They used what they had: tools, scraps of the ancient technology within the temple, and their sharp instincts. They knew they were outnumbered and outgunned, but turning back wasn't an option. Abandoning the god now, after everything, wasn't something they could live with. They had made a choice, and they were going to see it through, no matter the cost. The god, still weak but growing stronger by the hour, offered them more than just encouragement. It granted them small portions of its divine energy, enough to heighten their abilities and strengthen their resolve. They moved faster, thought quicker, adapted in ways they hadn't imagined. But even with this boost, they were still facing a vast, technologically superior force. The alien fleet appeared on the horizon, a sea of ships gleaming with cold, metallic precision. They hovered in the air, ominous and silent for a moment, before the first wave of attack hit. Energy blasts and projectiles rained down, shaking the ground and sending shockwaves through the temple. The humans scrambled, dodging debris and returning fire with whatever makeshift weapons they had managed to create. It was a chaotic symphony of destruction. The god watched, its energy fluctuating as it tried to muster enough strength to help. "You must hold them off," it whispered into their minds. "I need more time." Time was something the humans didn't have much of, but they weren't about to give up now. They fought with a fierceness that surprised even themselves. Despite the odds, they managed to push back the first wave, using their newfound agility and quick thinking to exploit weaknesses in the alien ships. It was a small victory, but it gave them hope. One of the humans, out of breath but determined, looked toward the sky. "They're not going to stop, are they?" The leader shook their head grimly. "No. This is just the beginning." The next wave came, larger and more aggressive than the first. The aliens were done playing games. They had underestimated the humans, but now they were bringing the full force of their technology down on them. Explosions rocked the temple as more ships descended, their weapons cutting through the air with terrifying precision. The humans regrouped, trying to keep up, but it was clear they were struggling. The god, sensing their desperation, pushed harder, trying to channel more of its energy to them. "Hold on," it urged. "I am almost ready." But the humans were at their limit. They had fought valiantly, but the alien forces were relentless, and they were only human, after all. Just as the leader was about to signal a retreat, something changed. The air around them grew heavy with a strange energy, and the god's voice echoed in their minds stronger than before. Now. In an instant, the tide of the battle shifted. The god, having regained enough of its power, unleashed a wave of energy that surged through the temple, engulfing the humans and pushing back the alien forces. The ships in the sky faltered, their systems flickering as the god's presence disrupted their advanced technology. The humans, now fully empowered by the god's energy, moved like lightning, tearing through the alien ranks with a force they didn't know they had. The aliens, caught off guard by the sudden shift, scrambled to regroup. But it was too late. The humans, once on the brink of defeat, now had the upper hand. They fought with a determination that seemed almost inhuman, their bodies fueled by the god's power and their own unbreakable spirit. For the first time, the aliens began to retreat. Their ships, once so imposing, now fled from the battlefield, leaving behind the wreckage of their fallen comrades. The humans watched in disbelief as the once unstoppable force crumbled before them. But there was no time for celebration. The leader, breathing heavily, looked at the others. "This isn't over. They'll be back, and they'll bring more next time." The god, now fully aware of the threat that still loomed, spoke again. "You have done well. But I am not yet at full strength. When they return, it will be worse." The humans nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. They had won the battle, but the war was far from over. They had bought themselves time, but the alien civilizations would not give up so easily. They would return, and they would come with a vengeance. The leader looked toward the horizon, where the last of the alien ships had disappeared. "Let them come," they said, their voice steady. "We'll be ready." The god, though still weak, felt something it hadn't felt in centuries, a sense of belonging. These humans, despite their fragile bodies and limited resources, had stood by it when no one else would. They had fought for it, not for power or glory, but because they believed in something greater. And for that the god knew, it would fight for them, too. The retreat of the alien fleet gave the humans and the god a brief moment of calm. But no one was under any illusion that the conflict was over. The aliens would return, and when they did, it would be with even more force. The humans knew they had to prepare, but there was no fear in their hearts. They had faced the impossible and survived. Now, they were determined to finish what they had started. The god, still gathering strength, spoke directly to the leader. "When they come back, they will stop at nothing to erase me. They fear what I represent." The leader nodded, already understanding what was at stake. The aliens feared the power of the god, but more than that, they feared the idea of something greater than their technological dominance. They couldn't allow a force they had abandoned to exist, let alone one supported by a species they saw as beneath them. But the humans didn't care about the aliens' arrogance. They had never fought for power or recognition. They fought because it was right, because they couldn't abandon the god the way others had. That resolve had carried them this far, and it would carry them through the final confrontation. As the god's energy continued to build, the humans worked tirelessly to reinforce their defenses. They scavenged what they could from the alien ships that had been downed in the previous battle, using parts to enhance their makeshift weapons. Every piece of technology they touched seemed to come alive under their hands, fueled by a combination of their ingenuity and the god's subtle influence. The humans were learning fast, adapting to a situation far beyond anything they had ever trained for. The god watched them closely, still trying to fully understand what made them different from all the others who had once knelt before it. "You do not worship me," it observed. "Yet you fight for me." One of the humans, pausing for a moment to wipe sweat from their brow, glanced up at the god. "Worship's never really been our thing," they said with a shrug. "But that doesn't mean we don't care." The god found this answer strange, yet strangely comforting. It had always been revered out of fear or for what it could give in return. But these humans didn't expect anything. They didn't demand favors or divine intervention. They fought because they chose to, not because they believed it would grant them any special status. As the final preparations were made, the humans gathered together for what they knew would be their hardest battle yet. They stood in a circle, their faces set with determination. The leader spoke quietly but firmly. "We've been through hell and back, and we're still standing. They think we're small, that we're weak. But we've proven we can handle whatever they throw at us. And we'll do it again." The others nodded in agreement, their resolve unshakable. They knew they might not survive the next fight, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that they had chosen this path, that they had stood by the god when no one else would. The sky darkened as the alien fleet returned, larger and more menacing than before. This time, there would be no retreat. The aliens intended to wipe out the god and the humans in one final strike. The humans stood ready, their makeshift weapons at their sides, their eyes fixed on the horizon. The first attack came quickly, a barrage of energy blasts that lit up the sky. The ground shook as the temple was hit again and again. But the humans held their ground, using their newly enhanced speed and strength to dodge and counterattack. They moved with a precision that defied explanation, their every action guided by both their own skills and the god's power. The god, now nearly at full strength, joined the fight. Its presence rippled through the air, a tangible force that disrupted the alien ships and sent waves of energy crashing into their ranks. The aliens, despite their superior numbers and technology, found themselves struggling against a force they couldn't fully understand. They had expected a quick victory, but instead, they were met with a resistance that only grew stronger with every passing moment. As the battle raged on, the humans continued to fight with everything they had. They worked in perfect harmony with the god, their movements almost instinctual, as if they had become an extension of the divine power that flowed through them. The aliens, despite their best efforts, couldn't break through their defenses. Then, in a moment of clarity, the leader realized something. The aliens weren't just trying to destroy the god, they were trying to erase the memory of it. They feared what the god represented, the idea that there was something more powerful than their machines, something that couldn't be controlled or explained by their technology. The god was a symbol of their failure, a reminder that they weren't as invincible as they thought. The leader shouted to the others. "They're scared of what we've done. They can't stand the thought that we've proven them wrong." The humans responded with a renewed surge of energy, pushing back harder than ever. The god, sensing the shift in the battle, unleashed its full power. A blinding light erupted from the temple, engulfing the alien ships in a wave of pure energy. The sky crackled with power as the god's presence overwhelmed the alien technology, disabling their ships and sending them crashing to the ground. The humans watched in awe as the alien fleet, once so fearsome, crumbled before their eyes. The battle was over. They had won. As the dust settled, the humans gathered around the god, their faces filled with a mixture of relief and disbelief. They had done it. Against all odds, they had protected the god and defeated a force far greater than themselves. The god, now fully restored, looked down at the humans. "You have given me more than just my life," it said quietly. "You have shown me the strength of your kind, the depth of your loyalty. I will not forget this." The leader smiled, tired but content. "We didn't do it for thanks. We did it because it was right." The god remained silent for a moment, contemplating the human's words. It had lived for eons, seen countless species rise and fall. But never had it encountered beings like these. They had no divine power, no advanced technology, yet they had achieved what no other species had, because they had heart. They had fought, not for glory or gain, but for something far more important, each other. In that moment, the god understood. It wasn't their weapons or their technology that made humans powerful. It was their will, their refusal to give up, their belief that every life, no matter how small, was worth fighting for. And for that, the god knew, humanity would endure.